A common joke among basketball fans is that Los Angeles has a team called the Lakers, despite the fact that they have no lakes. Well, as a Los Angelian myself, I'm here to say that we do have a few lakes. Here's one now, Echo Park Lake. But of course, the city is not known for the lakes. The real reason the team is called the Lakers is because they used to be based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and one of Minnesota's nicknames is the land of 10,000 lakes. But how did the Lakers end up in California? Why did they leave Minnesota? Let's find out. Believe it or not, the Lakers franchise did not originate in Minneapolis. The inception of the Lakers can actually be traced back to 1946, when they were the Detroit Gems in the National Basketball League. The team was started by a Michigan jewelry store owner by the name of Maurice Winston. World War II had taken away a lot of pro basketball players, but in the aftermath of the US's victory, it seemed like everyone wanted to own a pro basketball team. The Detroit Gems were interesting. Winston signed Harlem Globetrotter Willie King to play 14 games for the team, which was one of the early attempts to integrate pro basketball. But the Gems finished their inaugural 1946-47 season with a 4-40 record. And according to this article from December of 46, it appears that one of those 4 wins was due to an issue with an arena's clock that allowed the Gems to squeak out a 1-point victory. Hardly any fans showed up to see the Gems. In fact, it's reported that one night, a total of 6 fans showed up to watch the Gems play, and Winston ended up giving a refund to all 6 customers. You're probably thinking, this team became the Lakers? The team that would win 17 championships. Well, one June night in 1947, Winston was deep in thought, wondering what the heck he was going to do after such a disastrous season. But that's when his phone began to ring. On the other end was a 24-year-old sports writer by the name of Sid Hartman. Hartman was calling on behalf of a couple Minneapolis businessmen, and he told Winston that his investors were interested in buying the Gems for $15,000. Winston said yes, obviously. So, Hartman flew to Detroit, met Winston in the airport, signed some papers, and handed him a check. Yeah, just like that. After 15 minutes, Minnesota had acquired what would end up being the first NBA dynasty. The Minneapolis investors could have started their own franchise from the ground up, but with that 4-40 record the Gems finished with, the team would be getting the first pick in the 1947 draft. But Sid wanted to shoot higher. At this time, there was another NBL team called the Chicago American Gears. That team ended up winning the 1947 NBL title, and the best player on that team was their center, George Mikan. With Gears owner Maurice White creating plans to break away from the NBL and form his own basketball league, and also his drinking getting heavier, Hartman predicted that Chicago would fold and Minneapolis would be able to snatch up Mikan. Growing up in a time where the majority of people thought giant players were too uncoordinated and clumsy to play basketball, George Mikan originally had no intentions of becoming a professional ball player. Mikan may have been 6'10", but he was quite shy and awkward, and had to wear quarter-inch thick glasses due to being nearsighted. But while in high school, Mikan met DePaul coach Ray Meyer, who saw potential in the gentle giant. The following months would see Mikan put in an intense amount of work. He developed his shooting, increased his strength, and he even took dancing lessons to help with his coordination. Meyer developed a goal each day, 250 hook shots with his right hand, and 250 hook shots with the left hand. This would later be known as the Mikan drill. But most importantly, Mikan learned how to take pride in his height, rather than be embarrassed by it. From 1947 to 1954, Mikan led the Minneapolis Lakers to 6 championships, though only 5 are recognized by the NBA. During these dominant years, the Lakers would also add other Hall of Famers, such as Jim Pollard, Vern Mickelson, and Slater Martin. The head coach of this Lakers team was John Kundla. After serving in World War II, Kundla was hired to be the basketball coach at St. Thomas College, a small Catholic school in St. Paul. Hartman made several trips to Kundla's apartment in northeast Minneapolis to try and talk the young coach into accepting the Lakers job. Kundla played a lot of softball in those days, and Hartman would follow him, trying to work his sales pitch between innings. Kundla had his concerns, as did a lot of coaches. You gotta remember, pro ball was like the Wild West in these days. Only the strong survived, and the ones that did survive usually did not survive for long. But for the Lakers' sake, Kondla did eventually accept the head coaching job and turned the Minneapolis Lakers into the best defensive team, as well as the most disciplined. To me, the sweetest championship during this run was the final one in 1954. This was their last dance, if you will. Going into the season, Mikan was bearing his share of battle scars. Over his amateur and professional career, he had broken 2 legs, broken bones in his right and left foot, fractured a wrist, his nose, a thumb, 3 other fingers, and he even said he had gotten a total of 166 stitches. In the words of Jim Pollard, nobody gave George anything. He earned his baskets. Although people were doubting them, the Lakers finished with a league-best 46-26 record and beat the Syracuse Nationals in a 7-game final series. After not being able to come to terms with a new contract after winning his 6th championship, and with a small fortune and injuries he had amassed in his career, Mikan announced his retirement in the off-season, at the age of 29, though Mikan would later say that the real reason he retired was because he wanted to spend more time with his wife and children, and begin thinking about his life in the professional world outside of basketball. Without the best player in the game, the Lakers finished the 1954-55 season with a 40-32 record, good enough for 3rd best in the league, but the team ended up losing to the Fort Wayne Pistons in the West Finals. After the series was over, Jim Pollard decided that maybe it's time for me to call it quits too. Now the Lakers were without their 2 best players. The Lakers got off to a rough start in the 55-56 season. In their first 27 games, they had just an 8-19 record. The once most untouchable team in the league was crumbling before everyone's eyes, and someone who was especially bothered by this was Mikan. So much so that by December, he began planning a comeback. That's right, Mikan was going to throw on that Lakers jersey one last time. His agent began negotiating with one of the Lakers' part owners, Max Winter. He asked for Mikan to get a new $35,000 contract, but Winter supposedly said, "I'd rather sell you my interest in the team for that kind of money." And then, without even wrapping up the deal, Winter embarked on his annual trip to Hawaii. When other Lakers owner Ben Berger got wind of what Winter had said, he was kinda pissed. Berger had always thought that Winter had gotten too much credit for the Lakers' success, so he offered Mikan the money in order to buy out Winter. Max Winter would go on to form the Minnesota Vikings. Mikan played just 37 games in the 55-56 season. The game was getting faster, and it was clear Mikan's knees couldn't keep up. In the words of Sid Hartman, it was stupid for him to come back. He had taken a lot of punishment during his career. His knees were shot. Hartman could see that the Lakers were heading for their first losing season in Minneapolis. Then, he got an idea. Hartman was basically thinking, alright, you remember how we dominated the league with the best center in the game, and now the game is getting faster? What if we draft the next best center, who's also super fast? What if the Lakers lost the season in spectacular fashion? So much so that the Lakers could get the first overall pick in the 1956 draft. And the player Hartman had his eyes set on was none other than Bill Russell, star for the University of San Francisco. So, how were they gonna tank? Well, in January of 1956, Hartman struck a deal with the Boston Celtics to trade them Vern Mickelson in exchange for the rights to 3 Kentucky players, Frank Ramsey, Cliff Hagan, and Lou T. As the often forgotten 3rd star in the Dynasty Lakers, Vern Mickelson was now the team's main guy. He had become a rebounding and scoring force. I know, it sounds crazy. Bill Russell was going to be a Laker? Well, strangely, after the deal was set to go through, Celtics owner Walter Brown simply asked Ben Berger to back out of the transaction. Berger did, which left Hartman pretty angry. John Kondla was not a fan of this losing strategy. He wanted to win, so he had lobbied hard for Berger to shut the plan down. Mickelson also did not want to leave Minneapolis. With Hartman's plan no longer in effect, the Lakers did manage to make the 1956 playoffs, but they were eliminated by the St. Louis Hawks in the West semis. George Mikan retired for good afterwards, and it was the Celtics who acquired Bill Russell in the 1956 offseason. Sid Hartman would be gone by season's end as well. He reportedly told Berger, "You go get somebody else to run it," it being the Lakers. With Mikan gone, for real this time, Lakers attendance plummeted. So much so that in February of 57, Berger was ready to sell the Lakers to a couple of Missouri businessmen who wanted to move the team to Kansas City, but Berger decided to wait 1 week to let local Minneapolis investors make their bids for the team. Two of these local guys in particular were Bob Short and Frank Ryan. Short had an insatiable drive and work ethic. The dude had a law degree, he had worked in the trucking business, and would go on to be the national treasurer while Lyndon B. Johnson was president. With the help of 30 other investors, Short and Ryan were able to buy the Lakers for $150,000. The Lakers finished 1957 with a 34-38 record and lost to the Hawks in the West Finals. It didn't take Bob Short long to get involved with his first scandal as Lakers owner. The team's new all-star center, Clyde Leveillette, who was leading the team in scoring and rebounding, was accused of exposing himself to a woman at a St. Paul nightclub. Fearing this would lead to a public relations nightmare, the team quickly traded Leveillette away to the Cincinnati Royals. In return, the Lakers got the 1957 first overall pick, Hot Rod Hundley. Since George Mikan couldn't attract fans on the court, Short figured the next best thing was to make Mikan the Lakers' new head coach and make John Kundla the general manager. But the plan did not go as expected. Mikan coached the Lakers to a 9-30 record before Kundla was brought back in as head coach. The Lakers finished 1958 with a 19-53 record, worst in the league, and the worst in Lakers history up until 2016. After 2 years, Sid Hartman's dream had finally been realized. It's estimated that only around 900 fans were showing up each game. The owners were losing money. I've also read one account that says another issue could have been the rivalry between Minneapolis and St. Paul. Apparently, the Lakers were getting no love from St. Paul. The Lakers were in real trouble. This wasn't an era where you could afford to make mistake after mistake. Teams in the 40s and 50s folded almost as soon as they were formed. But in the midst of these trying times, the Lakers would find their savior in the 1958 first overall pick, Elgin Baylor. The high-flying 6'5" forward took Little Seattle University to the 1958 championship game against college basketball juggernaut, the Adolph Rupp Kentucky Wildcats. As a rookie for a once prestige, but now desperate Minneapolis team, Baylor took the Lakers to the 1959 finals. But, like the year previous, Baylor ended up losing the championship. After the 4-game final sweep, John Kundla left the Lakers to become head coach for the Minnesota Gophers. John Castellani, who coached Baylor in college, was hired to coach the Lakers for the 1959-60 season, but he was replaced mid-year by Jim Pollard. This brings us to the night of January 17th, 1960. A few hours earlier, the Lakers had lost to the Hawks 119-135, despite Elgin Baylor scoring 40 points and grabbing 23 rebounds. The Lakers were sitting on a 13-30 record, and safe to say, the team wasn't in the best of moods getting ready to fly home to Minneapolis. Now, we need to talk about this guy, Jim Krebs. He was the Lakers' new 6'8" center and had been a first-team All-American at SMU. Krebs was a guy who lived life by his own rules. He was a famous jokester off the court, but on the court, he was known for being aggressive and often doing strange or unexpected things. The most interesting of which was a new hobby Krebs had picked up, using a Ouija board. Yeah. In fairness, this was before The Exorcist, so Ouija boards did not have the reputation that they would eventually get. He didn't think it was anything dangerous. Krebs often brought this Ouija board on trips for the whole team to play with, but one of the more ominous messages the board told Krebs was that soon, the Lakers would be involved in a plane crash. Now, initially, the team thought Krebs was pulling another joke on them, so the warning was just kinda shrugged off. Sitting in the St. Louis airport, veteran pilots Harold Gifford and Vernon Ullman received information that a bad snowstorm was approaching and that the temperature outside was not too far from freezing. But regardless, the team boarded the plane and got settled for their night trip. Because of financial problems the team was facing, Bob Short thought it would be better for the Lakers to fly in his DC-3 chartered plane. 23 people boarded the plane, including Frank Ryan, his wife, and 2 of their children. Nothing was strange about the first 10 minutes of the Lakers' flight. The plane's takeoff was successful, and the guys had started playing cards to make the 2 hours go by faster. But after those initial 10 minutes, the lights on the plane began to flicker. Most thought the pilots were playing a joke. In fact, it seems like a ton of practical jokes happened on these early Lakers flights. In the words of Jim Pollard, there was always somebody up front screwing around with the pilots. They'd flip off the lights, or sit in the co-pilot's seat and fly the plane a little bit. As soon as the plane started dipping, you knew they were screwing around. But soon enough, the plane lights went completely out and never returned. The generator that was providing power for the lights, the navigation devices, as well as the radio, had blown. According to Tommy Hawkins, the only sound the passengers could make out in the darkness were the two spinning propellers outside. Jim Pollard and Frank Ryan headed into the cockpit by flashlight and asked the pilots, "What's going on?" Ullman responded by saying, "Well, we're flying home by the stars. I'm not sure what the wind conditions are, but we don't have much to worry about until we start coming down." Pollard and Ryan headed back into the cabin and did their best to make the passengers think that everything was fine. Being based in Minnesota, the team was used to having some bumpy plane rides in the winter, but then they began to remember Jim Krebs' ominous message from his Ouija board, and the smiles began to fade. Without a generator, ice began to form on the plane windows, the wings, and with the cabin no longer pressurized, passengers had to wrap themselves in blankets in order to stay warm. According to Hot Rod Hundley, it was 20 below zero in the cabin. With no radio to help the plane get back to the St. Louis airport, the only option for the pilots was to keep going. Ullman and Gifford would take turns opening the glass window and sticking their heads out into the freezing winter storm. What was supposed to be a 2-hour flight soon became a 3.5-hour flight. It was now 1:30 in the morning, and the plane was almost out of fuel. But miraculously, through the storm, the pilots were able to spot a water tower that read, "Carroll, Iowa." They were 150 miles off course, and worse yet, there were no lights on in the town below, so landing in an airport was not an option. The next best thing was to land in a cornfield and hope for the best. Gifford told the passengers about the situation and that they had to buckle up. Jim Krebs began making promises, saying that if he survived this ordeal, he'd quit cheating in card games, he'd play harder on the court, and he would throw away that Ouija board. Elgin Baylor had a different approach. The Hall of Famer simply wrapped himself in a blanket, walked to the back of the plane, and lay down in the aisle, saying if he was gonna die, he might as well die comfortably. But luckily, Ullman and Gifford were able to land the plane in an Iowa cornfield. None of the passengers were hurt. In fact, when they all hopped out of the plane, they began to have a cheerful snowball fight. Reportedly, when the passengers walked to a nearby road, a hearse pulled up, being driven by the village undertaker. Only a few days after evading death in an airplane, Bob Short told his players that they would be flying across the country to play a series of games on the West Coast, at neutral sites. Some of the players balked at the idea, but Short said either get on the plane or find a new job. If you're unfamiliar with what a neutral site is, it's when a game is played on neither team's home court. It's pretty rare in NBA history, but much more common in college basketball. The reason for this was because, by winter of 1960, Bob Short knew the Lakers had to move. They were losing money, and lots of it. Part of the problem was their arena. For years, the Lakers had been asking the University of Minnesota if they could play at the more popular Williams Arena. Short even offered to buy a new iron lung for the university's hospital, but all he got were a bunch of no's. Unless the Lakers sold 3,000 season tickets for the 60-61 season, they were either going to have to move or fold. Short began looking west, specifically at all the beautiful land not yet claimed by a pro basketball team. Former minority owner Morris Chalfin had considered moving the Lakers to California in 1957 after he saw the Brooklyn Dodgers relocate to LA in the same year, but Ben Berger wanted the Lakers to stay in Minneapolis, so the idea was dropped. The Lakers played 2 back-to-back California games against a rookie Wilt Chamberlain and the Philadelphia Warriors. The first was played at the Cow Palace in San Francisco on January 31st, and the second was played at the new Los Angeles Sports Arena on February 1st. a total of 10,202 fans showed up to the ladder, which Bob Short took notice of. Maybe the Lakers could be more successful on the West Coast. The team finished the 1960 season with a 25-50 record, and they lost to the Hawks in the West Finals. 1 month after being eliminated, on April 27, 1960, Bob Short and Frank Ryan went to a league owners meeting at the Roosevelt Hotel in New York. They were there to ask permission to go to California. Even though Short announced he had reached a tentative agreement for the Lakers to play at the LA Sports Arena next season, the other NBA team owners voted down Short's request to move to California, 7-1. The major issue the other owners had were the increased travel costs that would come with playing in California. But Knicks owner Ned Irish had another motive. He wanted the Lakers to fold so that he could snatch up Elgin Baylor. Short and Ryan were panicking. At lunch, they pleaded with Hawks owner Ben Kerner. They said, "If we stay in Minneapolis, we'll die." Kerner replied, "Then you'll have to die in Minneapolis." It seems like that was it. The Lakers were finished. Short and Ryan were finished. All hope was lost. But although this sounds cliche, in their darkest hour, Short and Ryan found salvation. The two noticed a headline in a newspaper at the hotel cigar stand. Abe Saperstein, the founder of the Harlem Globetrotters, had formed the American Basketball League. Saperstein had been trying to get an NBA team for years, and the league kept holding him off with promises that he could have a team in California, but nothing was ever officially enacted upon. So now, Saperstein was out of patience and decided to do something about it himself. Short and Ryan brought this information with them back to the other owners after lunch. They said that if the NBA didn't get to California first, this new rival league would. It was a much more compelling argument, but it wasn't quite enough for the other owners. They wanted to be compensated for their team's extra travel costs going to the West Coast. Short agreed, and the owners voted in favor of letting the Lakers move to Los Angeles, a perfect 8-0. The Lakers players had no objections once they found out they were going from snowy Minnesota to sunny California. In fact, Hot Rod Hundley and Rudy LaRusso embarked on a cross-country car race to see who could get there first, though they did make time to stop in Vegas and have plenty of fun. And better yet, the Lakers drafted Jerry West in the 1960 offseason. The Lakers would make the finals 6 times in the 1960s, but they didn't win a championship in LA until 1972. NFL owner Jack Kent Cooke bought the Lakers from Bob Short in 1965 for a then record $5 million. In 1967, the Lakers would begin playing at the now famous Forum, and the rest, as they say, is history. I hope you have a good day. Take care.